Senate will come to order. Chaplain Dr. Black will lead the Senate in prayer. Thank you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, let your glory be over all the earth. Thank you for your faithfulness that endures forever. Today, give our lawmakers steadfast hearts that they may honor you. Give them the wisdom, courage, and commitment to strive to do your will. May their debates and discussions be characterized by civility. Lord, lead our senators throughout life's changing scenes, providing them with strength for every challenge. Remind them of the importance of reverential awe, which is the beginning of wisdom. Lord, grant us all competence, reverence, and humility for the living of these days. We pray in your righteous name. Amen.
Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. The Senate will be in a period of morning business, with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each. Iowa.
Iowa is the leading producer of ethanol. About 43,000 jobs connected with that production. Ethanol is produced from corn. Iowa is the #1 producer of corn in the United States. The House of Representatives has passed a bill for 15% moisture or 15% mixture of ethanol with petroleum gasoline. That's E15. Up till now, E10, 10% mixture, has been considered a pretty good success story. So expanding it will have more homegrown, renewable energy if we can get E15 nationwide year-round. And it takes legislation to make that happen. In recent weeks, some of my colleagues have come to the floor to speak on this very same subject, some for E15 legislation and some against E15 legislation. So I think there's a lot of myths about ethanol and E15 that need to be cleared up. One of those myths that continues to spread is that year-round nationwide E15 is that it is a mandate. So I want to be very clear. E15 legislation is not a mandate. It's a choice, and it's this simple. You're driving into the filling station to fill up your car. Even today, with the high price that it is, you will see that you have a choice of gasoline with no ethanol or with 10% ethanol or E15. Trouble is, not every retailer has it, but it is a choice when you go to the pump to punch the button you want for the type of gasoline that you want to put in your car. I support E15 legislation because it removes both outdated and unnecessary red tape from the EPA. Just as an example of that red tape is, the law says that in some parts of our country, you can't dispense ethanol in your gasoline June, July, August, and September. You can't do it during those months. However, we've been successful under 2 years of Trump 1, 4 years of Biden, and 2 years now of Trump by presidential waiver that we can have E15 nationwide. But that's the red tape that we shouldn't have to go through, and that's the reason for the legislation. It would allow consumers to have a choice to purchase E15 year-round in all 50 states, and it takes legislation to do that because you'll never get the retailers of gasoline to spend the money to update their pumps for E15 without the legislation. Some have done it now, trusting that there'll be a presidential waiver year after year, but you can't. A lot of retailers won't depend on that. So, this legislation is not a mandate because it would not force gas stations to sell E15 if they don't want to. However, because E15 saves consumers 10 to 30 cents per gallon, I suspect that many fuel retailers will choose to provide their customers with this high-quality, low-cost, homegrown fuel. I yield the floor, suggest the absence of a quorum.
Ms. Elsa Brooks.
President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the quorum call be suspended.
Objection.
Mr. President, enforcing our nation's laws is not optional. Securing our borders isn't optional. And supporting the men and women who do this important work, funding law enforcement isn't optional either. That should go without saying. But unfortunately, Mr. President, members of the Democrat Party have made it very clear that they disagree. Incredibly, Democrats have refused to provide a single penny for border security and immigration law enforcement for fiscal year 2026. That's $0 for a physical presence at our nation's border. $0 to deport criminals who have made their way into our country illegally. If Democrats had their way, illegal immigrants would be allowed to flood across our nation's southern border entirely unchecked. And I guess we really shouldn't be surprised, Mr. President. After all, this is hardly the first time Democrats have demonstrated that border security and immigration enforcement are at the very bottom of their priority list. For decades now, Democrat-led cities and states have implemented sanctuary policies that prevent local law enforcement from cooperating with federal immigration authorities. These policies have had deadly consequences, yet Democrats have defended them and continued to uphold them across the country. Then there was the crisis at the southern border. Four straight years of record-breaking illegal immigration at our southern border under Democrats and President Biden. As the New York Times reported, and I quote, "After Mr. Biden became president, migrant encounters at the southern border quickly doubled, then kept rising. New arrivals overwhelmed border stations, then border towns, and eventually major cities like New York and Denver," end quote. That from the New York Times, Mr. President. Now contrast that with today. Illegal crossings have plummeted to a trickle. And as of the end of April, not a single illegal immigrant has been released at the border and into our country for an entire year. But, Mr. President, Democrats are apparently determined to bring back unchecked illegal immigration. And to do that, they are embracing the far-left ideologies of defund law enforcement and abolish ICE. These were once considered fringe positions among Democrats. Today, they're basically the official position of the Democrat Party. The junior senator from California said in January, and I quote, "I'm not giving ICE or Border Patrol another dime," end quote. The junior senator from Massachusetts told a crowd in February, and I quote, "We know that we must defund and abolish ICE," end quote. And one Democrat Senate candidate has even said, and I quote, "Dismantling ICE is the moderate position," end quote. Mr. President, this is today's Democrat Party, a party enthralled to its far-left base, and a party that has completely abandoned its national security responsibilities when it comes to enforcing immigration law and securing our borders. Mr. President, needless to say, as long as Republicans are in charge, we are not going to let Democrats defund border security and immigration law enforcement. So we're moving forward with a bill to fund these important responsibilities for the remainder of the Trump administration so that Democrats cannot again put our nation's security and American safety in jeopardy. Mr. President, I don't know who Democrats think benefits from blocking funding for Border Patrol and ICE. The American people certainly don't benefit from there being no law enforcement at the border. They don't benefit from human traffickers and drug smugglers being able to enter our country unchecked, or from rapists, murderers, and other criminals being allowed to live freely in our country. The Democrats' position puts illegal immigrants in danger as well. Border Patrol agents are the ones pulling illegal immigrants out of the Rio Grande and rescuing dehydrated migrants in the desert. But Democrats don't support these agents' work. If Democrats' position helps anyone, it helps the cartels, the coyotes, and other criminals who prefer to act without risk of detection and apprehension. And I suspect that's why we haven't heard much from Democrats in recent weeks about the core of this legislation. Democrats haven't exactly demonstrated an eagerness to come to the floor and defend open borders. And I strongly suspect that's because at some level they know that their position is completely indefensible. Mr. President, President Trump and Republicans have cleaned up Democrats' mess at the border. We've secured the southern border and put criminals on notice that they will no longer be living freely in our country. And we plan to keep it that way. Mr. President, I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Elsa Brooks.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, the press reports that Trump says he will table his $2 billion MAGA slush fund, but a promise from Trump is worthless. If Trump and Republicans are truly abandoning this corrupt scheme, they should have zero problem banning it in law. This week, Senate Democrats will push legislation to ban this slush fund and ensure no president can ever do this again. Trump's word is nowhere near enough. Donald Trump's attempt to establish this trust fund alone is one of the most glaring cases of corruption in American history. Trump's slush fund is the textbook definition of self-dealing. Trump sued himself, settled with himself, and then Trump gives himself and his family immunity to evade their taxes, and Trump makes you, the American taxpayer, pay for it all. This slush fund could never have passed the smell test. At a time when Americans can barely afford to fill their tanks, to keep the lights on, put food on the table, Trump wants the American people to pay for handouts for MAGA billionaires, cop-beating January 6 insurrectionists, and his own family. He wanted no transparency, no oversight, no accountability. It's disgusting. Now, Trump is claiming that the slush fund is dead for now, but Democrats will not stop until it's well and truly buried and can never see the light of day. Democrats are going to make sure this slush fund is dead and cannot be revived, just like we did with the ballroom. Republicans can try to wriggle their way out of answering for this corruption, but it won't work. If Republicans try to force through their reconciliation bill again, the first amendment I will offer will be to ban the slush fund permanently and forever. If Republicans try to meddle with the appropriations process to do Trump's bidding, we will fight it there too. And if Republicans try to use toothless constraints to make the slush fund more palatable, we will press them to dismantle it entirely. For something as inherently corrupt as this slush fund, half measures won't cut it. You don't fix a corrupt slush fund by relying on the word of the most untrustworthy president we have ever had. You ban it. The slush fund is rotten to the core. Democrats will make sure Republicans vote on it no matter what. This is corruption in broad daylight, and Republicans are foolish to think they can hide in the shadows. Now on costs. Last week, we got new inflation numbers showing that prices are at their highest level in years. Families are saving less as they struggle to make ends meet. Americans are working harder, paying more, and getting less. That's Trump's economy at work. From Trump's mouth to the American people's ears, he said, quote, "I don't think about Americans' financial situation. All Trump thinks about is building his golden ballroom, putting his name on a massive arch, lining his pocket with taxpayer dollars, and slapping his face onto a $250 bill. None of that lowers costs. None of that helps working families. All Trump's vanity projects do is waste time and money. And our Republican friends seem to go along with almost all of it, maybe even all of it. Meanwhile, two-thirds of Americans, say they've had to cut back on groceries the past few months because of skyrocketing costs. This comes as new data shows household electricity prices have spiked by 18% since Trump took office. With the hottest months now upon us, summer season, rising energy costs will only further strain families' pocketbooks. The average home cooling costs could reach nearly $800 this summer, an 8.5% increase over last year and 37% more than in 2020. A poll over the weekend found that 53% of all Americans say the current cost of living is the worst they have ever seen. What happened to lowering costs on day one? which Trump so proudly proclaimed. And of course, where are the Senate Republicans? Instead of listening to the American people, working with Democrats to bring costs down, Republicans are working around the clock to aid and abet Trump's corruption, to build his vanity projects on the taxpayer's dime, and funnel tens of billions of dollars to his masked agents who are already flush with cash. Americans are screaming for relief, and all they hear back from Senate Republicans is silence. Complete, complicit silence. And on the Iran war, once again, the ongoing fighting in Iran has blown holes in Trump's claim that victory is at hand. Over the weekend, Trump said, quote, he's in no hurry to end the war in Iran. No hurry? Tell that to our troops who are in harm's way every second this war continues, including those who were fired upon in Kuwait just this morning. Tell that to their families. Really? No hurry? I'll tell you who's in a hurry for this blunder to end. The American people who are getting crushed by record gas prices at the pump. They're in a hurry. Trump has proven over and over again that he's incapable of getting our country out of this mess. Congress needs to step up. Democrats and a handful of Republicans came together before Memorial Day to advance a war powers resolution to withdraw our troops from hostility with Iran. We will not stop forcing votes to end this war until this disastrous war is over once and for all. Trump and his allies in the Senate may not see the urgency of ending this war, but Democrats and the American people do. Yield the floor and yield the floor.
Democrat Whip.
Mr. President, the Senate will soon vote on the nomination of Kathleen Lane, President Trump's nominee to serve as a lifetime appointment and judge on the U.S. District Court for the District of Montana. There are more than 3,000 licensed attorneys in the state of Montana. You would believe that the White House, in finding a federal judge for a lifetime appointment, would be able to find among those 3,000 plus licensed attorneys in Montana one with experience having served as a judge. Instead, President Trump has selected Ms. Lane. Ms. Lane is not remotely qualified to serve as a district court judge in the federal system. That's not my opinion. That's the official finding by the American Bar Association. Ms. Lane is the first judicial nominee to receive a, quote, not qualified, close quote, rating from the ABA during President Trump's second term. As the American Bar Association explained in finding this rating, quote, it's based on issues with her experience, which is an important component of competence. The organization found that Ms. Lane had failed to gain, quote, substantial courtroom and trial experience in the less than 9 years since she was admitted to the bar, end of quote. As the ABA detailed, quote, Ms. Lane never tried a case as lead counsel, whether civil or criminal. Moreover, as the ABA noted, it appears she's never conducted a direct examination in a courtroom, picked a jury, or offered an opening statement or a closing argument. Putting this lady on the bench for a lifetime appointment to the federal court would be like selecting an umpire for tonight's Major League Baseball team, Major League Baseball game, who's never even worked a Little League game. Ms. Lane's experience is disqualifying. Now, my Republican colleagues may claim that the ABA, American Bar Association, is a partisan organization, but over the past year, the ABA has rated dozens of Trump nominees qualified or well qualified. Ms. Lane is the only one who has received a not qualified rating. Not only has her legal career been extremely brief, but it has also been extremely partisan. Ms. Lane currently works at the Republican National Committee, which President Trump highlighted when he announced her nomination. She certainly may not have courtroom experience, but she's got experience at the so-called MAGA think tank. The president claimed Ms. Lane, quote, played a critical role in stopping voter fraud at the Republican National Committee. He believes that qualifies her for a lifetime appointment to the federal court. But even before she went to work for the Republican National Committee, Ms. Lane repeatedly chose to litigate politically charged issues and work to limit women's rights, voting rights, and the rights of LGBTQ Americans. Ms. Lane is not the person for this job. She's too ideological, too inexperienced for the role to which she's been nominated. I urge my colleagues to oppose her nomination. Mr. President, on a separate topic, today is June 1st, the arbitrary deadline President Trump imposed on congressional Republicans to send their partisan funding bill to his desk for signature. So why aren't the Republican colleagues headed to the White House today for a flashy bill signing ceremony to fund more abuses by the ICE agency? I'll tell you, because 2 weeks ago, Senate Republicans left town after an internal revolt over the president's so-called anti-weaponization fund. Nearly $1.8 billion. 1.8 billion, that's even more than the ballroom. $1.8 billion for a slush fund for the president's cronies and allies. Well, who would be eligible for any part of the $1.8 billion fund? People like Brandon Fellows. This may be a new name to you, but we're becoming more familiar with him. He was pardoned by President Trump, a full and unconditional presidential pardon, for being one of the January 6th insurrectionists who was convicted and sentenced on felony and misdemeanor charges for climbing an exterior wall of the Capitol, entering the building through a broken window. Well, time has passed. Has he shown any remorse since he was convicted of that crime? No. He still believes President Trump's big lie about the 2020 election and the conspiracy theory that January 6th, which he's on video participating in, was a setup, entrapment. I remember that day very well. I was seated here. President Pence was presiding over the Senate. We were officially counting the ballots as to who actually won the election in 2020. All of a sudden, a little after 2 o'clock, those doors opened and policemen came in. I assume they were policemen, they were in plain clothes, and went up to the vice president on the podium, whispered in his ear, and pulled him off the podium quickly through that door. We sat here wondering what was going on. There was a big demonstration going on outside. Nobody knew what was happening. They were making noise, but that's not unusual in the Capitol. At that point, a member of the Capitol Police, one of the officers who protected you in the gallery and me today when we entered the building, came and stood before us and said, "Stay where you are, stay in your seats. This is going to be a safe room. This mob that came up from the White House is going to be stopped. Stay where you are." So we all sat here, not quite sure what to do next. 10 minutes later, the same policeman came up and said, "New orders, leave immediately. Evacuate through this door and we'll follow you." So we headed out, all the senators off the floor and the staff as well, to an adjoining building. What happened next? The mob that broke down the doors and came into the Capitol, came into the Senate chamber and the House chamber, rifled through our desk, aped for pictures in front of one another, and basically threatened people who were here that they had to leave. That's what actually happened. Now, we know that happened because it was on videotape. We saw it. America saw it. Every minute of it. Followed carefully. And yet we actually have people today who deny it ever happened. If you're a student of history, you know that in the Soviet Empire, they did that regularly. If history became inconvenient, they rewrote it, wrote another book, condemned people for saying the old way was the right way. That's what's happening here. Well, this fellow, Brandon Fellows, was one of the people who broke into the Capitol through a broken window. He still believes that Trump won the 2020 election. He still believes that conspiracy theory about January 6th, despite it actually never happened, is what he says, which he's on video participating in. He likes to spend his free time dressing up as an ICE agent and encouraging others to do the same to terrorize immigrants. How much is Mr. Fellows seeking from the anti-weaponization $2 billion slush fund of the president? He thinks his inconvenience he was encountered is worth 30 million federal tax dollars. 30 million. And we can expect droves of other January 6th insurrectionists to also seek these cash rewards. Even those who've continued to threaten our communities by committing more crimes, many of them of January 6th that mobbed this chamber, are back in jail for committing another crime after President Trump's pardon, ranging from conspiracy to murder to child sex abuse and exploitation. Let me say it a different way. While American families are struggling to afford gas for their cars, put food on their tables, pay their utility bills, thanks to Trump's tariffs and war of choice in Iran, the president wants to hand lofty payouts to his political buddies and the criminals who attacked our democracy at his request. It reeks of corruption. I'll also note as part of this settlement, the IRS is permanently barred from auditing past tax returns of President Trump, his family, and related companies. Get that? Ever play Monopoly? Remember that get out of jail card you hung on to? President Trump wanted a get out of jail card from the federal government, his government, that he would never be prosecuted for tax fraud. Never. It included his family, his colleagues, his business buddies, and friends. That was part of this deal of creating this slush fund. Is this America? Is this a monopoly game? And if it is, it's embarrassing. Permanently barred from auditing past tax returns of Donald Trump, his family, and related companies. Taken all together, this is deeply disturbing. Senate Democrats will continue to fight this unprecedented and unacceptable $1.8 billion slush fund for January 6 insurrectionists and Trump loyalists, and will work to halt the flow of taxpayers' dollars to Trump's massive deportation campaign, while standing ready to have a serious bipartisan negotiation about the need for reforms to our immigration system. If this partisan reconciliation bill ever sees the light of day, we'll put Republicans on record by votes on this floor as to whether or not they accept this as a legitimate exercise of government function. Will our Republican colleagues stand by the Constitution and the laws of our country, or will they join the president in this folly? I hope time will tell that they will join us in a bipartisan effort to stop the slush fund. I yield the floor.
The senator from Kansas.
Madam President, thank you. The Senate will shortly consider, in fact, tomorrow we'll vote on cloture and the confirmation of the nomination of Jeffrey Kuhlman to be a judge for the U.S. District Court of the District of Kansas. I rise this evening to urge my colleagues to support his confirmation. During my time in the Senate, I've had the opportunity to vote on the confirmation of 3 current Kansas District Court judges. With each nominee, I weigh the candidate's temperament, principles, experience, commitment to administer equal justice under a law. In addition to the 3 current court judges in Kansas, there are 3 additional vacancies in the District Court of Kansas. Mr. Kuhlman is the first of the 3 Kansans the Senate will be considering to fill those vacancies. I certainly had the opportunity to meet with Mr. Kuhlman. I encouraged the White House to make his nomination to be a judge, and I was impressed. I would not have done that but for my sincere and real impression of his expertise, his legal experience, and his commitment to serving the people of Kansas. I've always had a desire to see, as growing up in a small town in rural Kansas, that there might be federal judges who could come from small towns. And I've always been looking for someone who practices law in a small town in our state that has federal court experience. Mr. Kuhlman is a native of western Kansas. He grew up in a county seat town called Ness City, not too far from my hometown, and has a population of just a little over 1,000. And maybe this doesn't matter to everyone or to most people, but I want people who grew up in that manner to know that there's a future, that there's things that they can do, and that there's not a handicap to be a small-town, rural Kansas kid. In helping select candidates for the White House, I had the goal of making certain that we select qualified candidates from across the state, but I also was always interested in could there be a rural person. Jeffrey earned his bachelor's degree in history from Kansas State University before receiving his law degree from the Antonin Scalia Law School at George Mason University. After law school, Mr. Kuhlman returned to Kansas as was selected to serve a 2-year clerkship for what soon became Chief Judge Eric F. Melgren. In that role, he gained experience, he gained valuable and hands-on experience across all phases of federal litigation. Jeffrey then entered private practice as a litigation associate at a Wichita firm, Hinkle Law Firm. Mr. Kuhlman has been a partner at Watkins Calcara in Great Bend, where his practice focuses on civil litigation, including municipal law, constitutional matters, commercial disputes, and personal injury cases. Mr. Kuhlman and his wife, Lauren, who is originally from Albert, even a smaller town, they're raising their 5 young children in Great Bend, another small town in Kansas. Mr. Kuhlman has demonstrated strong commitment to the rule of law, a deep respect for the Constitution, and a clear dedication to serving the people of Kansas. His experience both inside and outside the courtroom has prepared him well for the responsibilities of the federal bench, and I'm confident in his professional competence and judicial temperament. I'm pleased to support his nomination, and I urge my colleagues to join me in voting to confirm Mr. Jeffrey Kuhlman as a U.S. District Judge for Kansas. I believe he would meet all the qualifications and desires by members of the United States Senate. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from New Jersey.
Madam President, I rise today to share stories that I heard from detainees and families at Delaney Hall, and to tell you why these stories should be a call to action to ground our immigration policies in humanity. There are currently approximately 800 detainees at Delaney Hall, which is located in Newark, New Jersey. Over the past week, it's become an example of our broken immigration system. We've seen the images, but what you have not heard are the stories. It's the stories of people I've met and their families that have stayed with me over the past weeks and months. They've stayed with me because these are stories of people who are afraid, people who are asking to be treated with dignity, people who just want the humanity that any of us would ask for. I've heard repeatedly and seen with my own eyes the substandard conditions at Delaney Hall. Food that is inedible. I had a man show me a container of milk that was curdled solid because it was clearly not stored properly. I've heard about the issues of mold and issues of safety and security. What I've heard has been unacceptable. The totality of the stories that I've heard have been disturbing, but when I think about individual people, the failures really come into focus. I spoke over this week, for instance, with a man at Delaney Hall who has stage 3 lung cancer, not been given the medical care he needs, and he told me that he knows his time is short. He actually just wants to go back home to his home country of origin and spend the rest of whatever remains in his life with his family, but is not being able to do so. I spoke with an 18-year-old high school senior, and all she wanted to do was be able to graduate and go to prom. Instead, she's stuck there by herself. I actually met with her mother outside of the facility, and you can imagine how worried she was about her 18-year-old high school senior in this detention facility by herself. This isn't someone who's a hardened criminal or someone we desperately need to get off of our streets. It's a kid. It's a daughter. It's a high school student who is at least spending her time in there trying to translate for some of the other detainees that don't speak English. She's trying to figure out how to help other people. And instead, we have her stuck in there for an indefinite amount of time. She has no idea how long it's going to take to resolve her circumstances. This is someone, as a father, when I think about my own 2 boys, I worry about what is being robbed of her childhood as she's going through this situation. There is a commonality with a lot of these stories. Parents just trying to take care of their kids. Parents who have been in the United States for many decades, many of them married to American citizens, many of them parents of American citizens. These people that deserve better, but they aren't getting better because we have a fundamentally broken system, a system that is built on corruption and profit, fueled by cruelty, a system that strips people of their humanity. Let's start with the motivating factor of profit that drives some of this. Delaney Hall is operated by a company called Geo Group. And you may not know that name, but it is the largest private prison corporation in America. It runs about 20 facilities for ICE coast to coast, including from New Jersey to California, from Florida to Pennsylvania to Texas and beyond. And they're making a lot of money. They got awarded nearly $1 billion contract to operate Delaney Hall. This is something that is driving so much of the decision-making because when they're telling me that they have only one full-time doctor for nearly 800 detainees there, many of them have real significant health care needs, you can understand that actually they could hire more than one doctor. They could hire more doctors. But then that's going to be less profit for Geo Group. When we're talking about the substandard food, they could get better food, at least some quality measure better without the spoiled and disgusting milk that I was talking about. But again, that'll be less profit. And here is just something that is just driving so much of this for so many of the problems that are out there. Madam President, when it comes to our immigration policy, that is no choice to me from what we're seeing in terms of the profits and the conditions that are there. We should always be putting people before corporate profits. It's not just Geo Group or CoreCivic or these other companies that are pushing this forward. And we know that we can find ways to be able to address this. And it starts with not upholding their standards when it comes to these detention facilities. At Delaney Hall, we've seen the detainees and the challenges of getting access to doctors. I talked to a pregnant woman who is not getting the care that she needs when it comes to doctors and medical checkups. And she has no idea how long she's going to be there for. She literally asked me, looked in my eyes and said, do I have to be prepared to have a baby in Delaney Hall, in this detention facility? And instead of upholding a standard of basic humanity, what we're hearing from detainees now is about retaliation for them simply speaking out. Detainees being transferred now away from their families to other detention sites because they were protesting, because of this retaliation that is happening before our eyes. And finally, we see a judicial system that has fundamentally failed detainees, their families, and our entire immigration system. Simply put, there are not nearly enough judges to hear the number of immigration cases we face at this moment. We already had a backlog of millions of cases before, and it's getting worse and worse. And yes, we see the Republicans here in Congress pushing forward on the enforcement, but what is it that we can do to be able to address the needs on the judiciary? When I was there at Delaney Hall, one of the detainees ran out into the hallway to grab a piece of paper off of the bulletin board and showed me a piece of paper that said when the courts come back into session after the holiday weekend, that one immigration judge had before them 74 cases in one day. How is that a fair process? It's a farce. 74 cases in one day, that's about 5 minutes a case. That's if everything goes perfectly back to back, not to mention the translation needs of so many. We can do better, and I hope that all of us can agree that in this country, the rule of law is sacrosanct. And that is something where everybody has the opportunity for making their case in court. What I've heard at Delaney is disturbing, and what I've seen of this brokenness of our immigration system is disheartening. But what we need to do is move forward with clarity. And here are 3 things we can immediately focus on. First, let's surge the medical support. Again, 1 doctor for 800 people is not enough, especially when they have such needs. ICE has something called the ICE Health Service Corps. There are other means by which we can surge medical support to Delaney and elsewhere to make sure that people are not being looked over and their needs passed aside. That is something, again, that I hope all of us can agree on. Number 2, we need to give people access to the courts. This is not just something that I said is important for us to have adherence to the rule of law, but it's costing the American people billions of dollars to just have this process continue to hold up. Because when someone's there at Delaney Hall 8 months, 10 months, 12 months or beyond, with no sense of when it's going to end, that's on us. We're paying for it. The American people are paying for this. It's coming out of our pocket at a time when we have this affordability crisis and so many people in this country struggling to pay the bills. People deserve their day in court, and the American people deserve to not have their money wasted by a process that is so clearly broken. And third, we need investigations into the conditions immediately. The nearly $1 billion going to GEO Group for Delaney Hall, that's your taxpayer dollars. You should know where it's going and how they're spending it. We should have independent investigations into this and make sure that members of Congress can effectively conduct oversight visits. Because as I tried to go this past week, I was denied. The guards at the gate by GEO Group said, nope, you can't go inside. I had to literally call our old colleague, Secretary Mullen, to get access to this facility that, by the way, I actually called ahead and got approval to go inside, and they still stopped me. And when I went inside the facility and talked to the head of GEO Group in Delaney Hall and explained that his guards prevented me from going inside for an authorized visit, he looked me in the eye and called me a liar. That is not something that seems like it has any semblance of accountability, transparency, or obedience and accordance to the rule of law. We can and should do better. This is at a time when this chamber is getting ready this week to potentially send upwards of another $70 billion for ICE and CBP. Without the reforms, without the accountability and transparency. GEO Group is taking your money, and you should know what they are doing with it. Madam President, these are hard days for my state. Nobody should want the images that we've seen over the past week, but even more so, nobody should want the conditions to be able to continue, whether it's in Delaney Hall or elsewhere around this country. Because it doesn't just stop at Delaney Hall. These problems exist and persist all over the country. Delaney Hall isn't one bad apple. It's part of a systemic failure that we are witnessing across this nation. How we move forward is a choice between a status quo of corporate profit and cruel policies or moving forward to enforce our laws with humanity. It doesn't have to be the way that we see. And I urge my colleagues to work with me. Let's make the changes we know we need, not just at Delaney Hall, but at every detention facility across this country, and let's fix this broken system once and for all. And with that, I'll yield back.
The senator from Indiana.
I ask unanimous consent to waive the mandatory quorum call with respect to the Lane nomination.
Without objection.
Madam President, 23-year-old Brett Scrogum of Greenwood, Indiana, had a bright future ahead of him. After graduating recently as a top 100 student from the IU Kelley School of Business, Brett had plans to invest in housing properties and help his community grow and prosper. As a young child, Brett helped a neighbor rescue her dogs from a terrible house fire. Friends of his referred to him as, quote, a God-fearing Christian man who was always willing to help people. Though I never had the chance to meet him, it's clear to me that Brett was really an incredible person. And now I'll never get the chance to meet this bright young man. Because tragically, Brett was murdered in cold blood this weekend on his way to an Indianapolis Indians game with his family. The killing took place in a parking garage right next to the biggest church in downtown Indianapolis. College students and young families park there every week. I'm heartbroken by this senseless act of violence. Brett's families are in my thoughts and prayers, and I hope that the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department will arrest the murderer soon, who's still at large. The mayor of Indianapolis put out, frankly, a very weak statement that didn't even mention Brett's name. And so I wanted to come down to the floor as we kick off this week in our legislative business and talk about who he was, but also talk about what's happening in our capital city in Indianapolis, in my state. Brett's murder is the second murder in downtown Indianapolis in less than a week. Just before the Indianapolis 500, Gregory Anderson, a father of 5 children, was murdered in the downtown bar district in Indianapolis. And then last Sunday, a 16-year-old teenager was murdered in the northwest side of Indy. Madam President, these murders have no place in Indiana, especially in our capital city. Indianapolis is truly a great city. It has so much going for it. Indy is home to the Indianapolis 500, headquarters for the NCAA, the home of great businesses and their headquarters like Eli Lilly, world-class sporting events and other conferences and events that take place there, like the Indy 500 last week. So much more going for it. But what's happening in Indianapolis right now is a crisis. Soft on crime policies are ruining this great city. How much longer will we allow this to go on? The reason Indianapolis is plagued by violent crime is because Marion County lets it happen. Marion County Prosecutor Ryan Mears refuses to prosecute violent criminals. For example, one man in Indiana has faced over 30 criminal charges, most of them felony charges in Marion County, since 2020. This man should be locked up forever, but he's not, thanks to Ryan Mears, the prosecutor, and liberal judges and all of their soft on crime policies. And the rest of Indiana, especially the nearly 60% of all Hoosiers who live in the donut counties around Indianapolis and Marion County, the rest of them are punished for Marion County's refusal to do anything about it. Ryan Mears is a prosecutor gone rogue. He refuses to keep violent criminals behind bars, and he's a failure, an absolute failure of a prosecutor. But it's not only the prosecutor that refuses to enforce the law. State Senator Andrea Hundley, also a Democrat, recently said with regards to crime in Indianapolis that, quote, "We are not going to ever enforce our way out of this problem." That's not only a lie, it's a total excuse. If we keep making excuses for why we can't enforce the law and keep violent criminals in prison, we will never have safe neighborhoods and communities. And innocent people like Brett will continue to pay the price. Everyone wants to talk about fairness and dignity and legal protections for criminal defendants. But what about Brett? Where was his fairness? Why do we talk about the dignity of criminals and never about the dignity of their victims? We know how to keep our cities and our communities safe. We need to put large amounts of police officers on patrol. Let them do their job and ensure that criminals remain in prison. It's really as simple as that. But it's the opposite that keeps happening. A violent criminal who set a bus on fire in Indianapolis a few years ago was in and out of prison over 45 times in less than 2 decades. This is outrageous and completely unacceptable. But this is the world that soft on crime policies in Indianapolis and other big soft on crime cities enable. Law and order are necessary for any country or city to run well. And for there to be law and order, you need law enforcement officers who proudly wear the uniform and badge and rise up every morning to protect their communities. Those law enforcement officers need our support to do their jobs. Madam President, we are now just a couple of weeks away from National Police Week. Our federal, state, and local police officers are heroes, truly. They wake up every single day with the hope of serving their communities well and safely returning back to their families. They love what they do, and they want to keep all of us safe while they're doing it. But we need to make sure that they are not being sabotaged by soft-on-crime policies and politicians. Nothing will ever bring back Brett. And if we hope to prevent more young lives like this one from being taken far too early, we need to double down on our efforts to enforce law and order. We need to support our law enforcement officers and demand that our elected officials throw the book at violent criminals instead of letting them continue to cause mayhem and violence in our communities. Madam President, with that, I yield back.
Senator from Vermont.
Thank you. Madam President, artificial intelligence will almost certainly be the most transformational technology in the history of the world. It will profoundly impact the lives of every man, woman, and child in our country, and in fact, throughout the world. It will bring, and it is already bringing, unimaginable changes to our economy, to our democracy and political system, to our emotional well-being, to the health of our children, to our environment, and to how we educate and raise our kids. Further, there is a very real fear that as AI becomes smarter than humans, it could eventually function independent of human control with potentially catastrophic consequences. That's not me. That is what Nobel Prize scientists and experts are saying. Madam President, the question then is not whether AI will change the world. It will. The question is who will own and control the future? Who will benefit from AI and who will be hurt by it? Will AI be used to make life better for working families? Will it enrich our quality of life? Will it help us eliminate poverty, extend life expectancies, and help us solve the climate crisis? Or will the future of humanity be determined by a handful of some of the wealthiest people on the planet who have promoted and developed AI with no democratic input in order for them to become even richer and more powerful than they are today? That is the choice before us. Let us be clear. AI was not created out of thin air. It was not a brilliant idea that just popped into Mark Zuckerberg's head or Elon Musk's imagination. The foundation of AI is our collective human intelligence. Let me repeat that. The foundation of AI is based on our collective human intelligence. Our books, songs, artwork, journalism, computer code, scientific research, videos, conversations, images, and ideas spanning generations. It is our tweets, our Facebook posts, our TikTok videos, our Reddit comments. It is everything that human beings produce and that is absorbed into the digital world. That's not just my opinion. According to Sam Altman, the head of OpenAI, AI models were trained on our, quote, collective experience, knowledge, and learnings of humanity. That is Mr. Altman, the head of OpenAI. The reality is that big tech oligarchs have fed this knowledge into their AI models without permission, without acknowledgement, and without compensation. In other words, the creative work of many millions of people, writers, artists, musicians, journalists, teachers, scientists, and ordinary people, has been stolen by the wealthiest people in the world. Madam President, the time has come for us to reclaim what was stolen from us. Since AI is built on the collective knowledge of humanity, the wealth it generates must benefit humanity. Not just Elon Musk, not just Jeff Bezos, not just Mark Zuckerberg or Larry Ellison and the other multi-billionaires who have invested hundreds of billions into the development and implementation of AI. Not the venture capitalists in Silicon Valley or the vulture funds on Wall Street who see AI as the next great wealth extracting machine. And that is why, Madam President, in the coming weeks, I will be introducing the American AI Sovereign Wealth Fund Act. This legislation would give the public a direct ownership stake in the largest AI companies in our country. How would it do that? Through a one-time 50% tax, not on the profits of the largest AI companies in the U.S., but something that is far more valuable than that, the stock. If passed, this legislation would do two critical things. First, it would give the American people a direct role in determining the future of this technology. No longer would the future of AI and the transformation of human life that it will bring be dictated by a handful of big tech oligarchs. These people do not have the right to determine the future of humanity. Under this bill, the federal government would have the power, through its voting shares and an equal representation on each company's board, to block decisions that hurt the public and to push for policies that help them. Secondly, this legislation would guarantee that the trillions of dollars potentially created by AI are used to improve the lives of all of us, not simply to make the richest people in the world even richer. Further, if these AI companies continue to grow as dramatically as many analysts expect, then the value of the sovereign wealth fund created under this bill would grow as well, and the benefits to the American people would grow along with it. Madam President, let us be clear. This is not an original idea. In fact, it is an idea that has been endorsed by some of the leading AI companies in America. For example, OpenAI recently proposed creating a, quote, public wealth fund that provides every citizen, including those not invested in financial markets, with a stake in AI-driven economic growth. Anthropic also proposed the creation of, quote, national sovereign wealth funds with stakes in AI, end quote. Elon Musk, the owner of xAI, went further and said that, quote, universal high income via checks issued by the federal government is the best way to deal with unemployment caused by AI, end of quote. And Madam President, let us not forget, over 100 sovereign wealth funds exist all over the world. Again, this is not a new idea. Norway's sovereign wealth fund, the largest in the world, was funded from the country's abundance in oil and is now worth more than $2 trillion. Instead of a few oil executives pocketing all the benefits of that natural resource, Norway made the decision that the wealth created from it should be used to improve life for all of their people. This concept also exists right here in the United States. 50 years ago, Alaska created a sovereign wealth fund from the state's oil revenues. And for decades, it has paid dividends directly to Alaskans. In 2022, that check was over $3,000 per person. In 2023, it was $1,300 per person. 2024, it was $1,700, and last year it was $1,000. This is a direct check coming from a sovereign fund in Alaska to the people of that state. And even President Trump, in an executive order, has proposed establishing a United States sovereign wealth fund. Madam President, the billions, if not trillions of dollars generated by this legislation would provide direct payments to the American people. Further, as the fund generates more and more wealth, the proceeds would be used to ensure that every man, woman, and child in our country has a decent and dignified standard of living, including health care, education, and housing. The principle behind this legislation is simple. When a public resource generates wealth, the public should share in that wealth. In this case, artificial intelligence is being built on a public resource far more valuable than oil. the accumulated knowledge, creativity, and labor of humanity throughout history. That is what AI is all about. Bottom line, the future of AI and the fate of humanity must not be decided behind closed doors in Silicon Valley by the wealthiest people in the world. It must not be dictated by billionaires seeking to maximize their power and their profit. It must be decided by workers, parents, teachers, artists, scientists, communities, and the American people. It is our future. We must decide it. Let's get it done. Thank you very much.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on the nomination of Kathleen S. Lane of Montana to be United States District Judge for the District of Montana, signed by 17 senators.
By unanimous consent, the mandatory quorum call under Rule 22 has been waived. The question is it the sense of the Senate that the debate on the nomination of Kathleen S. Lane of Montana to be United States District Judge for the District of Montana shall be brought to a close? The yeas and nays are mandatory under the rule. The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsobrooks, Mr. Armstrong, Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Banks, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Ms. Blunt-Rochester, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Britt.
Aye.
Mr. Budd. Ms. Cantwell. Mrs. Capito. Mr. Cassidy. Ms. Collins. Mr. Coons. Coons, Mr. Cornyn, Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Curtis, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mr. Gallego, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Mr. Rono, Mr. Hoven, Mr. Husted, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Justice. Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Kim, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. McCormick, Mr. Merkley, Mrs. Moody, Mr. Moran, Mr. Moreno, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Ricketts, Mr. Risch, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schiff, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Sheehy, Ms. Slotkin, Ms. Smith, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young. What? Senators voting in the affirmative: Bozeman, Britt, Crapo, Ernst, Hawley, Hoban, Justice, Kennedy, Marshall, McConnell, Moran, Murkowski, Paul, Sheehy. Senators voting in the negative: Baldwin, Cantwell, Kim, Lujan, Murphy, Peters, Rosen, Sanders, Van Hollen. Mr. Haggerty, aye. Ms. Collins, aye. Mr. Husted, aye. Mr. Ossoff, no. Ms. Duckworth, no. Mr. Johnson, aye. Mrs. Fisher, aye. Mrs. Hyde-Smith, aye. Mr. Wyden, no. Mr. Graham, aye.
Okay.
Mr. Wicker, aye. Aye. Ms. Hassan, no. Mr. Scott of Florida, aye. Mr. Reed, no. Mr. Banks, aye. Mr. Lee, aye. Ms. Klobuchar, no. Mrs. Murray, no. Mrs. Moody, aye. Mr. Durbin, no. Ms. Warren, no. Ms. Blunt Rochester, no. Ms. Cortez Masto, no. Mr. Schiff, no. Mr. Kane, no. Mr. Whitehouse, no. Mr. Cassidy, aye. Mrs. Gillibrand, no. Mr. Moreno, aye. Ms. Slotkin, no. Ms. Smith, no. Mr. Warner, no. Ms. Lummis, aye. Mr. Padilla, no. Mr. Ricketts, aye. Mr. Booker, no. Mr. Warnock, no.
She's read it.
Mr. Armstrong, aye. Mr. Merkley, no. Mr. Kramer, aye. Mr. Grassley, aye. Mr. Hawley, aye. Mr. Budd, aye. Mr. Tuberville, aye. Mrs. Capito, aye. Mr. King, no. Mr. Markey, no. Mr. Scott of South Carolina, aye. Mr. Gallego, no. Mrs. Blackburn, aye. Mr. Daines, aye.
I might try wait first. Tightening it back up is a little
Mr. Risch,
It does,
aye.
but like, I don't want to cut it that short. You know, like it's just harder on the hair. I'm trying to protect
Mr.
myself.
Schumer,
I do to it.
no. Mr. Kelly, no.
It works, it works.
Mr. Curtis, aye.
Whatever works for you.
Mr. Cotton, aye.
Throwback to like when I used to have hair and actually had to wash it.
I would save a lot of money on shampoo. I have a lot of hair. Even
Mr. Schmidt, aye. Mr. Langford, aye. Mr. Coons, no. Mr. Cornyn, aye. Mr. Hickenlooper, no. Mr. Sullivan, aye. Mr. Rono, no. Mr. Barrasso, aye. Mr. Welch, no. Mr. Young, aye. Mr. Thune, aye. Mr. Heinrich, no. Ms. Brooks, no. Mrs. Shaheen, no. Mr. Blumenthal, no. Mr. Cruz, aye.
The yeas are 50, the nays are 44, and the motion is agreed to. The clerk will report the nomination.
Nomination, the Judiciary, Kathleen S. Lane of Montana to be United States District Judge for the District of Montana.
President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that notwithstanding Rule 22, the post-cloture time with respect to Executive Calendar Number 736 be expired, and the Senate vote on confirmation of the nomination at a time to be determined by the Majority Leader in consultation with the Democratic Leader tomorrow. Further, that the cloture vote with respect to Executive Calendar Number 743 occur following disposition of Executive Calendar Number 736. Finally, if any nominations are confirmed, the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, and the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate resume legislative session and be in a period of morning business with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I understand that there's a bill at the desk that is due for a second reading.
The clerk will read the title of the bill for the second time.
S4632, a bill to provide for a period of continuing appropriations in the event of a lapse in appropriations under the normal appropriations process and so forth and for other purposes.
Mr. President, in order to place the bill on the calendar under the provisions of Rule 14, I would object to further proceeding.
Objection having been heard, the bill will be placed on the calendar.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on the Judiciary be discharged from further consideration and the Senate now proceed to S-Res 727.
The clerk will report.
S-Res 727, supporting the designation of May 29, 2026 as Mental Health Awareness in Agriculture Day and so forth.
Without objection, the committee is discharged, and the Senate will proceed to the measure.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to consideration of S-Res 755 submitted earlier today.
The clerk will report.
S-Res 755, honoring the life of the Honorable Donald W. Regal, Jr., former Senator for the state of Michigan.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action to debate.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed. Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it stand adjourned until 10 a.m. on Tuesday, June 2nd. That following the prayer and pledge, the journal proceedings be approved today. The morning hour be deemed expired. The time for the two leaders be reserved for the use later in the day. Morning business be closed and Senate proceed to executive session to resume consideration of the Lane nomination. Further, that at 11:15 a.m. the Senate execute the order in relation to the Lane nomination, and that following disposition of the cloture motion with respect to the Coleman nomination, the Senate recess for the weekly conference meetings until 2:15 p.m. And if cloture is invoked on the Kuhlman nomination, the Senate vote on confirmation of the nomination at 2:15 p.m.
Without objection.
Mr. President, if there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it stand adjourned on the provisions of S-Res 755.
Under the previous order and pursuant to S-Res 755, the Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. Tuesday, June 2nd, 2026, and does so as a further mark of respect to the late Donald W. Regal, Jr., former Senator from Michigan.
Enjoy more of our videos on the Community Advocate Network channel, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you would like to advertise your service, special announcement, or event, you may contact us at the Community Advocate Network at gmail.com. For community resources and services, exclusive articles, and video content, join our private community on Patreon. Link is in the bio.